Wow!
It's post talk show story time. It's post talk show story time. I hope you guys are having a wonderful evening. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out on Hero Stream for the Talk with Hero. I really appreciate you. We are gonna read some more of The Witcher. This is gonna be quite a short stream. Last time I was able to get like 30 minutes of reading or so. So we'll see what I'm able to do tonight, because obviously I was doing a lot more talking. So we shall see. Alright, so last time, I don't need to go back into the actual chapters. Okay, so last time we met Geralt, and he is talking to the like Castellan and the king and like this other dude about the king's daughter, who was basically the offspring of him and his sister, which, you know, real gross. Have a good night, Vasilis. And because they had gone together, essentially she got cursed, and so the daughter was born deceased. I think the sister, like the mom, did not survive the birth, and 7 years later the princess, the dead princess, came out of its big crypt essentially and turned into a Striga. So they're trying to hire the Witcher to break the curse and get the princess to become, back a princess and not like a Grostriga. But, he's not sure if he can do it and this and that. So, the last thing that happened here is this Lord Ostrit came, which I don't exactly remember who he was. He's just one of the dudes. And he wanted to pay off Geralt and make him just leave. Instead of trying to kill, instead of trying to break the curse, nothing like that. Just wanted him to leave. Geralt was like, oh, yeah, and then knocked him out, essentially. So, as we know from last time, it will probably take me a little bit to get into the flow of reading. But once we do, we'll be good to go. So just bear with me. And let me know if the music is too loud or too quiet or anything like that. I need a cat to pet. Kyrie! Hi, baby! Kyrie got some pet. Thank you for redeeming Pet the Cat. Alright, here we go, guys. We are starting at this chapter 6. Ostrit quickly regained consciousness and looked around in the total darkness. He noticed that he was tied up. He did not see Geralt standing right behind him, but he realized where he was and let out a prolonged, terrifying howl. Kyrie, another pet. Danny, Thrun will be back soon, I promise. Keep quiet, said the Witcher. Otherwise you'll lure her out before her time. You damned murderer! Where are you? Untie me immediately, you louse! You'll hang for this, you son of a bitch! Quiet. Ostrit panted heavily. You're leaving me here to be devoured by her! Tied up? He asked, quieter now, whispering a violent invective. No, said the Witcher. I'll let you go, but not now. You scoundrel, hissed Ostrit, to distract the Striga. Yes. Zor! Hello, Zor! Ostrit didn't say anything. He stopped wriggling and lay quietly. Witcher? Yes. It's true that I wanted to overthrow Foltest, but I'm not the only one. But I am the only one who wanted him dead. I wanted him to die in agony, to go mad, to rot alive. Do you know why? Geralt remained silent. I loved Ada. The king's sister, the king's mistress, the king's trollop. I loved her. Witcher, are you there? I am. I know what you're thinking, but it wasn't like that. Believe me, I didn't cast any spells. I don't know anything about magic. Only once in anger did I say... Only once. Witcher? Are you listening? I am. It's his mother, the old queen. It must be her. She couldn't watch him and Ada. It wasn't me. I only once, tried to persuade them, but Ada... Witcher! I was besotted and said... Witcher... Was it me? Me? It doesn't matter anymore. Witcher, is it nearly midnight? It's close. Let me go. Give me more time. No. Ostrit did not hear the scrape of the tomb lid being moved aside, but the Witcher did. He leaned over and with his dagger cut the magnet's bonds. Ostrit did not wait for the word. He jumped up, numb, hobbled clumsily and ran. His eyes had grown accustomed enough to the darkness for him to see his way from the main hall to the exit. The slab blocking the entrance to the crypt opened and fell to the floor with a thud. Geralt prudently behind the staircase balustrade, saw the misshapen figure of the Striga, speeding swiftly and unerringly in the direction of Ostrit's receding footsteps. Not the slightest sound issued from the Striga. A terrible, quivering, frenzied scream tore the night, shook the old walls, continued rising and falling, vibrating. The Witcher couldn't make out exactly how far away it was. His sharpened hearing deceived him, but he knew that the Striga had caught up with Ostrit quickly. Too quickly. He stepped into the middle of the hall, stood right at the entrance to the crypt. He threw down his coat, twitched his shoulders, adjusted the position of his sword, pulled on his gauntlets. He still had some time. He knew that the Striga, although well fed after the last full moon, would not readily abandon Ostrit's corpse. The heart and liver were, for her, valuable reserves of nutrition for the long periods spent in lethargic sleep. The Witcher waited. By his count, there were about 3 hours left until dawn. The cock's crow could only mislead him. Besides, there were probably no cocks in the neighborhood. He heard her. She was trudging slowly, shuffling along the floor. and then he saw her. The description had been accurate. The disproportionately large head set on a short neck was surrounded by a tangled, curly halo of reddish hair. Her eyes shone in the darkness like an animal's. The Striga stood motionless, her gaze fixed on Geralt. Suddenly, she opened her jaws, as if proud of her rows of pointed white teeth, then snapped them shut with a crack like a chest being closed, and leapt, slashing at the Witcher with her bloodied claws. Geralt jumped to the side, spun a swift pirouette. The Striga rubbed against him, also spun around, slicing through the air with her talons. She didn't lose her balance and attacked anew, mid-spin, gnashing her teeth fractions of an inch from Geralt's chest. The Rivian jumped away, changing the direction of his spin with a fluttering pirouette to confuse the Striga. As he leapt away, he dealt a hard blow to the side of her head, with the silver spikes studding the knuckles of his gauntlet. The Striga roared horribly, filling the palace with a booming echo, fell to the ground, froze, started to howl howlily and furiously. The Witcher smiled maliciously. His first attempt, as he had hoped, had gone well. Silver was fatal to the Striga, as it was for most monsters brought into existence through magic, so there was a chance. The beast was like the others, and that boded well for lifting the spell, while the silver sword would, as a last resort, assure his life. The Striga was in no hurry with her next attack. She approached slowly, baring her fangs, dribbling repulsively. Geralt backed away and, carefully placing his feet, traced a semicircle. By slowing and quickening his movements, he distracted the Striga, making it difficult for her to leap. As he walked, the Witcher unwound a long, strong silver chain weighted at the end. The moment the Striga tensed and leapt, the chain whistled through the air, and coiling like a snake, twined itself around the monster's shoulders, neck, and head. The Striga's jump became a tumble, and she let out an ear-piercing whistle. She thrashed on the floor, howling horribly with fury, or from the burning pain inflicted by the despised metal. Geralt was content. If he wanted, he could kill the Striga without great difficulty. But the Witcher did not draw his sword. Nothing in the Striga's behavior had given him reason to think she might be an incurable case. Geralt moved to a safer distance, and without the Striga's without letting the writhing shape on the floor out of his sight, breathed deeply, focusing himself. The chain snapped. The silver links scattered like rain in all directions, ringing against the stone. The Striga, blind with fury, tumbled to the attack, roaring. Geralt waited calmly, and with his raised hand, traced the sign of Ard in front of him. The Striga fell back as if hit by a mallet, but kept her feet, extending her talons, bared her fangs. Her hair stood on end and fluttered as if she was walking against a fierce wind. With difficulty, one rasping step at a time, she slowly advanced. But she did advance. Some water. Geralt grew uneasy. He did not expect such a simple sign to paralyze the Striga entirely, but neither did he expect the beast to overcome it so easily. He could not hold the sign for long, it was too exhausting, and the Striga had no more than 10 steps to go. He lowered the sign suddenly and sprung aside. The Striga, taken by surprise, flew forward, lost her balance, fell, slid along the floor, and tumbled down the stairs into the crypt's entrance, yawning in the floor. Her infernal scream reverberated from below. To gain time, Geralt jumped on the stairs leading to the gallery. He had not even climbed halfway up when the Striga ran out of the crypt, speeding along like an enormous black spider. The Witcher waited until she had run up the stairs after him, then leapt over the balustrade. The Striga turned on the stairs, sprang and flew at him in an amazing 10-meter leap. She did not let herself be deceived by his pirouettes this time. Twice her talons left her mark on the Rivian's leather tunic, but another desperately hard blow from the silver-spiked gauntlet through the Striga's side shook her. Geralt, feeling fury building inside him, swayed, bent backward, and with a mighty kick, knocked the beast off her legs. The roar she gave was louder than all the previous ones. Even the plaster crumbled from the ceiling. The Striga sprang up, shaking, with uncontrolled anger and lust for murder. Geralt waited. He drew his sword, traced circles with it in the air, and skirted the Striga, taking care that the movement of his sword was not in rhythm with his steps. The Striga did not jump. She approached slowly, following the bright streak of the blade with her eyes. Geralt stopped abruptly, froze with the sword raised. The Striga, disconcerted, also stopped. The Witcher traced a slow semicircle with the blade, took a step in the Striga's direction. Then another. Then he leapt, feigning a whirling movement with his sword above her head. The Striga curled up, retreated in a zigzag. Geralt was close again, the blade shimmering in his hand. His eyes lit up with an ominous glow. A hoarse roar through his clenched teeth. The Striga backed away, pushed by the power of concentrated hatred, anger, and violence which emanated from the attacking man and struck her in waves, penetrating her mind and body. Terrified and pained by feelings unknown to her, she let out a thin, shaking squeak, turned on the spot, and ran off in a desperate, crazy escape down the dark tangle of the palace's corridors. Geralt stood quivering in the middle of the hall, alone. It had taken a long time, he thought, before this dance on the edge of an abyss, this mad, macabre ballet of a flight, had achieved the desired effect, allowed him to be psychically become one with his opponent, to reach the underlayers of concentrated will which permeated the Striga, the evil, twisted will from which the Striga was born. The Witcher shivered at the memory of taking on that evil to redirect it, as if in a mirror against the monster. Never before had he come across such a concentration of hatred and murderous frenzy, not even from basilisks, who enjoyed a ferocious reputation for it. All the better, he thought as he walked toward the crypt entrance and that blackness that spread from it, like an enormous puddle. All the better, all the stronger was the blow received by the Striga. This would give him a little more time until the beast recovered from the shock. The Witcher doubted whether he could repeat such an effort. The elixirs were weakening and it was still a long time until dawn. But the Striga could not return to her crypt before the first light, or all his trouble would come to nothing. He went down the stairs. The crypt was not large. There was room for 3 stone sarcophagi. The stabs covering the first was half pushed aside. Geralt pulled the 3rd vial from beneath his tunic, quickly drank its contents, climbed into the tomb and stretched out in it. As he expected, it was a double tomb for mother and daughter. He had only just pulled the cover closed when he heard the Striga's roar again. He lay on his back next to Ada's mummified corpse and traced the sign of Yrden on the inside of the slab. He laid his sword on his chest, stood a tiny hourglass filled with phosphorescent sand next to it, and crossed his arms. He no longer heard the Striga's screams as she searched the palace. He had gradually stopped hearing anything as the true love in Celandine began to work. Chapter 7. When Geralt opened his eyes, the sand had passed through the hourglass, which meant his sleep had been for longer than he had intended. He pricked up his ears and heard nothing. His senses were now functioning normally. He took hold of his sword and, murmuring an incantation, ran his head across the lid of the sarcophagus. He then moved the slab slightly, a couple of inches. Silence. He pushed the lid further, sat, holding his weapon at the ready, and lifted his head above the tomb. The crypt was dark, but the Witcher knew that outside dawn was breaking. He struck a light, lit a miniature lamp and lifted it, throwing strange shadows across the walls of the crypt. It was empty. He scrambled from the sarcophagus, aching, numb, cold, and then he saw her. She was lying on her back next to the tomb, naked and unconscious. She was rather ugly, slim with small pointed breasts, and dirty. Her hair, flaxen red, reached almost to her waist. Standing the lamp on the slab, he knelt beside her and leaned over. Her lips were pale and her face was bloody where he had hit her cheekbone. Geralt removed his gloves, put his sword aside, and without any fuss, drew up her top lip with his finger. Her teeth were normal. He reached for her hand, which was buried in her tangled hair. Before he took it, he saw her open her eyes. Too late. She swiped him across the neck with her talons, cutting him deeply. Blood splashed onto her face. She howled, striking him in the eyes with the other hand. He fell on her, grabbing her by the wrists, nailing her to the floor. She gnashed her teeth, which were now too short, in front of his face. He butted her in the face with his forehead and pinned her down harder. She had lost her former strength. She could only writhe beneath him, howling, spitting out blood, his blood, which was pouring over her mouth. His blood was draining away quickly. There was no time. The Witcher cursed and bit her hard on the neck, just below the ears. He dug his teeth in and clenched them until her inhuman howling became a thin, despairing scream, and then a choking sob, the cry of a hurt 14-year-old. He let her go when she stopped moving, got to his knees, tore a piece of canvas from his sleeve pocket, and pressed it to his neck. He felt for his sword, held the blade to the unconscious girl's throat, and leaned over her hand. The nails were dirty, broken, bloodied, but normal. Completely normal. The Witcher got up with difficulty. The sticky, wet grayness of early morning was flooding in through the crypt's entrance. He made a move toward the stairs, but staggered and sat down heavily on the floor. Blood was pouring through the drenched canvas onto his hands, running down his sleeve. He unfastened his tunic, slit his shirt, tore and ripped rags from it, and tied them around his neck. Knowing that he didn't have much time, that he would soon faint, he succeeded, and fainted. In Wyzim, beyond the lake, a cock, ruffling his feathers in the cold damp, crowed hoarsely for the third time. Chapter 8. He saw the whitened halls and beamed ceiling of the small chamber above the guard room. He moved his head, grimacing with pain, and moaned. His neck was bandaged, thickly, thoroughly, professionally. "Lie still, Witcher," said Valored. "Lie, do not move." "My sword." Yes, of course. What is most important is your Witcher's silver sword. It's here, don't worry. Both your sword and your little trunk, and the 3,000 orens. Yes, don't utter a word. It is I who am an old fool and you the wise Witcher. Foltest has been repeating it over and over for the last 2 days. 2. Do you like pudding? I do like pudding, Golden Dino. Oh yes, 2. She slit your neck open quite thoroughly. One could see everything you have inside there. You lost a great deal of blood. Fortunately, we hurried to the palace straight after the third crowing of the cock. Nobody slept in Wyzim that night. It was impossible. You made a terrible noise. Does my talking tire you? Putting these nuts in your mouth. Got him. The princess. The princess is like a princess, thin, and somewhat dull-witted. She weeps incessantly and wets her bed, but Foltest says this will change. I don't think it'll change for the worse, do you, Geralt? The Witcher closed his eyes. Good. I take my leave now. Rest. Valored got up. Geralt, before I go, tell me, why did you try to bite her to death, eh? Geralt? The Witcher was asleep. Chapter 2. The Voice of Reason, Part 1. Geralt. He raised his head, torn from sleep. Thank you for the follow, Golden Dino. The sun was already high and first blinding gold rays through the shutters, penetrating the chamber with tentacles of light. The Witcher shaded his eyes with his hand in an unnecessary, instinctive reflex which he had never managed to shake off. All he needed to do, after all, was narrow his pupils into vertical slits. It's late, said Neneki. Okay. I don't remember who Neneki is. It's late, said Neneki, opening the shutters. You've slept in. Off with you, Iola. The girl sat up suddenly and leaned out of bed to take her mantle from the floor. Geralt felt a trickle of cool saliva on his shoulder, where her lips had been a moment ago. Wait, he said hesitantly. She looked at him, quickly turned away. She had changed. There was nothing of the water nymph in her anymore. Nothing of the luminous, chamomile-scented apparition she had been at dawn. Her eyes were blue, not black, and she had freckles on her nose, her neckline, her shoulders. They weren't unattractive. They suited her complexion and reddish hair, but he hadn't seen them at dawn when she had been in his dream. With shame, he realized he felt resentment toward her. Resentment that she hadn't remained a dream and that he would never forgive himself for it. Wait, he repeated. Iola, I wanted... Don't speak to her, Geralt, said Neneki. She won't answer you anyway. Off with you, Iola. Wrapped in her mantle, the girl pattered toward the door, her bare feet slapping the floor, troubled, flushed, awkward. No longer reminding him in any way of... Yennefer. Neneki, he said, reaching for his shirt. I hope you're not annoyed that... You won't punish her, will you? Fool, the priestess snorted. You've forgotten where you are. This is neither a hermitage nor a convent. It's Melitelli's temple. Our goddess doesn't forbid our priestesses anything. Almost. You forbade me to talk to her. I didn't forbid you, but I know it's pointless. Iola doesn't speak. What? She doesn't speak. She's taken a vow. It's a sort of sacrifice through which... Oh, what's the point of explaining? You wouldn't understand anyway. You wouldn't even try to understand. I know your views on religion. No, don't get dressed yet. I want to check your neck. She sat on the edge of the bed and skillfully unwound the linen bandages wrapped thickly around the Witcher's neck. He grimaced in pain. As soon as he had arrived in Elander, Neneki had removed the painfully thick stitches of shoemaker's twine. with which they had stitched him in Wyzim, opened the wound and dressed it again. The results were clear. He had arrived at the temple almost cured, as if perhaps a little stiff. Now he was sick again and in pain, but he didn't protest. He'd known the priestess for years and knew how great her knowledge of healing, how rich and comprehensive her pharmacy was. A course of treatment at Melitelli's temple could do nothing but good. Neniki felt the wound, washed it, and began to curse. He already knew this routine by heart. She had started on the very first day and never failed to moan when she saw the marks left by the princess of Wyzim's talons. It's terrible to let yourself be slashed like this by an ordinary striga. Muscles, tendons, she only just missed your carotid artery. Great Melitelli, Geralt, what's happening to you? How did she get so close to you? What did you want with her, to mount her? He didn't answer and smiled faintly. Don't grin like an idiot. The priestess rose and took a bag of dressings from the chest of drawers. Despite her weight and low stature, she moved swiftly and gracefully. There's nothing funny about it. You're losing your reflexes, Geralt. You're exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating at all. Neniki spread a greenish mush, smelling sharply of eucalyptus over the wound. You shouldn't have allowed yourself to get wounded, but you did, and very seriously at that. Rito, hello. Fatally, even. And even with your exceptional powers of regeneration, it'll be months before your neck is fully mobile again. I warn you, don't test your strength by fighting an agile opponent during that time. Thank you for the warning. Perhaps you could give me some advice, too. How am I supposed to live in the meantime? Rally a few girls, buy a cart, and organize a traveling house of ill repute? And Neniki shrugged, bandaging his neck with quick, deft movements. Am I supposed to give you advice and teach you how to live? Am I your mother or something? Right, that's done. You can get dressed. Breakfast's waiting for you in the refectory. Hurry up, or you'll have to make it yourself. I don't intend to keep the girls in the kitchen to midday. Where will I find you later? In the sanctuary? No, Neniki got up. Not in the sanctuary. You're a welcome guest here, Witcher, but don't hang around in the sanctuary. Go for a walk, and I'll find you myself. Fine. Part 2. Geralt strolled for the 4th time along the poplar alley which led from the gate to the dwellings by the sanctuary and main temple block, which merged into the sheer rock. After brief consideration, he decided against returning to the shelter, and turned toward the gardens and outbuildings. Umpteen priestesses, clad in grey working garments, were toiling away, weeding the beds and feeding the birds in the henhouses. The majority of them were young or very young, virtually children. Some greeted him with a nod or a smile in passing. He answered their greetings but didn't recognize any of them. Although he had often visited the temple, once or twice a year, he never saw more than 3 or 4 faces he knew. The girls came and went, becoming oracles in other temples, midwives and healers specializing in women's and children's diseases, wandering druids, teachers, or governesses. But there was never a shortage of priestesses, arriving from all over, even the remotest regions. Melitelli's temple in Elendar was well known and enjoyed well-earned fame. The cult of Melitelli was one of the oldest, and in its day, one of the most widespread cults from time immemorial. Practically every pre-human race and every primordial nomadic human tribe honored a goddess of harvest and fertility, a guardian of farmers and gardeners, a patroness of love and marriage. Many of these religions merged into the cult of Melitelli. Time, which was quite pitiless toward other religions and cults, effectively isolating them in forgotten, rarely visited little temples and oratories buried among urban buildings, had proved merciful to Melitelli. She did not lack either followers or sponsors. In explaining the popularity of the goddess, learned men who studied this phenomenon used to hark back to the pre-cults of the Great Mother, Mother Nature, and pointed to the links with nature's cycle, with the rebirth of life and other grandiloquently named phenomena. Geralt's friend, the troubadour Dandelion, who enjoyed a reputation as a specialist in every possible field, looked for simpler explanations. Melitelli's cult, he deduced, was a typical women's cult. Melitelli was, after all, the patroness of fertility and birth. She was the guardian of midwives, and a woman in labor has to scream. Apart from the usual cries, usually promising never to give herself to any bloody man ever again in her life, a woman in labor has to call upon some godhead for help, and Melitelli was perfect. And since women give birth, and will continue to give birth, the goddess Melitelli, the poet proved, did not have to fear for her popularity. Geralt, Neniki, I was looking for you. Me? The priestess looked at him mockingly. Not Iola. Iola, too, he admitted. Does that bother you? Right now, yes. I don't want you to get in her way and distract her. She's got to get herself ready and pray if something's to come of this trance. I've already told you, he said coldly. I don't want any trance. I don't think a trance will help me in any way. Well, Neniki winced. Don't think a trance will harm you in any way. I can't be hypnotized. I have immunity. I'm afraid for Iola. It might be too great an effort for a medium. Iola isn't a medium or a mentally ill soothsayer. That child enjoys the goddess's favor. Don't pull silly faces, if you please. As I said, your view on religion is known to me. It's never particularly bothered me, and no doubt it won't bother me in the future. I'm not a fanatic. You've a right to believe that we're governed by nature and the force hidden within her. You can think that the gods, including my Melitele, are merely a personification of this power, invented for simpletons so they can understand it better, accept its existence. According to you, that power is blind, but for me, Geralt, faith allows you to expect what my goddess personifies from nature. Order, law, goodness, and hope. I know. Man, reading makes me drink a lot of water. If you know that, then why your reservations about the trance? What are you afraid of? That I'll make you bow your head to a statue and sing canticles? Geralt, will simply sit together for a while. You, me, and Iola, and see if the girl's talents will let her see into the vortex of power surrounding you. Maybe we'll discover something worth knowing. And maybe we won't discover anything. Maybe the power and fate surrounding you won't choose to reveal themselves to us. Will remain hidden and incomprehensible. I don't know. But why shouldn't we try? Because there's no point. I'm not surrounded by any vortex or fate. And if I were, why the hell would I delve into it? Geralt, you're sick. Injured, you mean? I know what I mean. There's something not quite right with you. I can sense that. After all, I have known you ever since you were a youngster. When I met you, you came up to my waist. And now I feel that you're spinning around in some damned whirlpool, tangled up in a slowly tightening noose. I want to know what's happening, but I can't do it myself. I have to count on Iola's gifts. Locke, hello. David, hello. You want to delve too deeply. Why the metaphysics? I'll confide in you if you like. I'll fill your evenings with tales of ever more astounding events from the past few years. Get a keg of beer so my throat doesn't dry up and we can start today. But I fear I'll bore you because you won't find any nooses and vortexes there. Just a witcher's ordinary tales. I'll willingly listen to them, but a trance, I repeat, would do no harm. Don't you think, he smiled, that my lack of faith makes such a trance pointless? No, I don't. And you know why? No. Neniki leaned over and looked him in the eyes with a strange smile on her pale lips. Because it would be the first proof I've ever had that a lack of faith has any kind of power at all. A Grain of Truth, Part 1. A number of black points moving against a bright sky streaked with mist drew the witch's attention. Birds. They wheeled in slow, peaceful circles, then suddenly swooped and soared up again, flapping their wings. The Witcher observed the birds for a long time, then, bearing in mind the shape of the land, density of the wood, depth, and of course, of the ravine which he suspected lay in his path, calculated the distance to them, and how long it would take to cover it. Finally, he threw aside his coat and tightened the belt across his chest by 2 holes. The pommel and hilt of the sword strapped across his back peeked over his shoulder. We'll go a little out of the way, Roach, he said. We'll take a detour from the highway. I don't think the birds are circling there for nothing. The mare walked on, obedient to Geralt's voice. Maybe it's just a dead elk, said Geralt, but maybe it's not. Who knows? There was a ravine, as he had suspected. The Witcher scanned the crowns of the trees, tightly filling the rift. ASMR cough, sorry. Should have muted for that. But the sides of the gully were gentle. The riverbed dry and clear of black thorns and rotting tree trunks. He crossed it easily. On the other side was a copse of birches, and behind it a large glade, heath and undergrowth, which threw tentacles of tangled branches and roots upward. The birds, scared away by the appearance of a rider, soared higher, croaking sharply in their hoarse voices. Geralt first saw the corpse immediately. The white of the sheepskin jacket and matte blue of the dress stood out clearly against the yellowing clump of sedge. He didn't see the second corpse, but its location was betrayed by the 3 wolves sitting calmly on their haunches, watching the Witcher. His mare snorted, and the wolves, as if at a command, unhurriedly trotted into the woods, every now and again turning their triangular heads to watch the newcomer. Geralt jumped off his horse. The woman in the sheepskin and blue dress had no face or throat, and most of her left thigh had gone. The Witcher, not leaning over, walked by her. The man lay with his face to the ground. Geralt didn't turn the body over, seeing that the wolves and birds hadn't been idle. There was no need to examine the corpse in detail. Jotun, hello! The shoulders and back of the woolen doublet were covered with thick black rivulets of dried blood. It was clear the man had died from a blow to the neck, and the wolves had only found the body afterward. On a wide belt next to a short cutlass in a wood sheath, the man wore a leather purse. The Witcher tore it off and, item by item, threw the contents on the grass. A tinderbox, a piece of chalk, sealing wax, a handful of silver coins, a folding shaving knife with bone handle, a rabbit's ear, 3 keys, and a talisman with a phallic symbol. 2 letters written on canvas were damp with rain and dew, smudged beyond readability. The third, written on parchment, was also ruined by damp, but still legible. It was a credit note, made out by the Dwarves Bank in Miraval to a merchant called Rule Asper, or Aspen. It wasn't for a large sum. Bending over, Geralt lifted the man's right hand. As he expected, the copper ring digging into the swollen blue finger carried the sign of the Armorer's Guild. A stylized helmet with visor, 2 crossed swords with the rune A, engraved beneath them. The Witcher returned to the woman's corpse. As he was turning the body over, something pricked him in the finger. A rose pinned to the dress. The flower had withered but not lost its color. The petals were dark blue, very dark blue. It was the first time Geralt had seen such a rose. He turned the body over completely and winced. Drop Bear! Thank you for subscribing for 10 months! Thank you! I love you, Drop Bear! On the woman's bare and bloody neck were clear bite marks, and not those of a wolf. The Witcher carefully backed away to his horse. Without taking his eyes from the forest edge, he climbed into the saddle. He circled the glade twice, and leaning over, looked around, examining the ground closely. So, Roach, he said quietly, the case is reasonably clear. The armorer and the woman arrived on horseback from the direction of the forest. They were on their way home from Murville, because nobody carries an uncashed credit note for long. Why were they going this way and not following the highway? I don't know. But they were crossing the heath side by side, and then, again, I don't know why. They both dismounted or fell from their horses. The armorer died instantly. The woman ran, then fell and died, and whatever attacked her, which didn't leave any tracks, dragged her along the ground, with her throat in its teeth. The horses ran off. This happened 2 or 3 days ago. The mare snorted restlessly, reacting to the tone of his voice. The thing which killed them, Geralt continued, watching the forest edge, was neither a werewolf nor a leshy. Neither would have left so much for the scavengers. If there were swamps here, I'd say it was a Kikimora or a viper, but there aren't any swamps here. Leaning over, the Witcher pulled back the blanket, which covered the horse's side, and uncovered another sword, strapped to his saddlebag, one with a shining ornate guard and black corrugated hilt. Well, Roach, we're taking a roundabout route. We better check why this armorer and woman were riding through the forest, not along the highway. If we pass by ignoring such incidents, we won't ever earn enough for your oats, will we? The mare obediently moved forward across the heath, carefully sidestepping hollows. Although it's not a werewolf, we won't take any risks, the Witcher continued, taking a bunch of dried monk's head from a saddlebag and hanging it by the bit. The mare snorted. Geralt unlaced his tunic a little and pulled out a medallion engraved with a wolf with bared jaws. The medallion, hanging on a silver chain, bobbed up and down in rhythm to the horse's gait, sparkling in the sun's rays like mercury. You guys just giving hugs to everybody. It's really cute. Part 2. Okay, just checking how long we've been going. Part 2. He noticed the red tiles of the tower's conical roof from the summit of a hill as he cut across a bend in the faint trail. The slope, covered with hazel, dry branches, and a thick carpet of yellow leaves, wasn't safe to descend on horseback. The Witcher retreated, carefully rode down the incline and returned to the main path. He rode slowly, stopped the horse every now and again, and hanging from the saddle looked out for tracks. The mare tossed her head, neighing wildly, stamped and danced on the path, kicked up a storm of dried leaves. Geralt, wrapping his left arm around the horse's neck, swept his right hand, the fingers arranged in the sign of Axii, over the mount's head, and he whispered an incantation. "Is it as bad as all that?" he murmured, looking around and not withdrawing the sign. "Easy, Roach, easy." The charm worked quickly, but the mare, prodded with his heel, moved forward reluctantly, losing the natural springy rhythm of her gait. The Witcher jumped nimbly to the ground and went on by foot, leading her by the bridle. Saw a wall. There was no gap between the wall and the forest, no distinct break. The young trees and juniper bushes twined their leaves with ivy, and wild vines clinging to the stonework. Geralt looked up. At that same moment, he felt a prickle along his neck, as if an invincible, soft creature had latched onto his neck, lifting the hairs there. He was being watched. He turned around smoothly. Roach snorted. The muscles in her neck twitched, moved under her skin. A girl was standing on the slope of a hill he had just climbed down, one arm resting on the trunk of an alder tree. Her trailing white dress contrasted with the glossy blackness of her disheveled hair, falling to her shoulders. She seemed to be smiling, but she was too far away to be sure. "Greetings," he said, raising his hand in a friendly gesture. He took a step toward the girl. She turned her head a little, following his movements. Her face was pale, her eyes black and enormous. The smile, if it had been a smile, vanished from her face as though wiped away from it with a cloth. Geralt took another step. The leaves rustled underfoot, and the girl ran down the slope like a deer, flitting between the hazel bushes. She was no more than a white streak as she disappeared into the depths of the forest. The long dress didn't appear to restrict her ease of movement in the forest. Roach neighed anxiously, tossing her head. Geralt, still watching the forest, instinctively calmed her with a sign again. Pulling the mare by the bridle, he walked slowly along the wall, wading through burdock up to his waist. He came to a sturdy gate, with iron fittings and rusty hinges, furnished with a great brass knocker. After a moment's hesitation, Geralt reached out and touched the tarnished ring. He immediately jumped back, as at that moment the gate opened, squeaking, clattering, and raking aside clumps of grass, stones, and branches. There was no one behind it. The Witcher could only see a deserted courtyard, neglected and overgrown with nettles. He entered, leading Roach. The mare, still stunned by the sign, didn't resist, but she moved swiftly and hesitantly after him. The courtyard was surrounded on 3 sides by a wall and the remains of some wooden scaffolding. On the 4 sides stood the mansion, its facade mottled by a pox of chipped plaster, dirty damp patches, and festooned with ivy. The shutters with their peeling paint were closed, as was the door. Geralt threw Roach's reins over the pillar by the gate and slowly made his way toward the mansion, following the gravel path past a small fountain full of leaves and rubbish. In the center of the fountain, on a fanciful plinth, a white gold dolphin arched, turning its chipped tail upward. Next to the fountain, in what a very long time ago used to be a flower bed, grew a rose bush. Nothing but the color of flowers made this bush unique, but the flowers were exceptional. Indigo, with a faint shade of purple on the tips of some of the petals. The Witcher touched one, brought his face closer and inhaled. The flowers held the typical scent of roses, only a little more intense. The door and the shutters of the mansion flew open at the same instant with a bang. Geralt raised his head abruptly. Down the path, scrunching the gravel, a monster was rushing straight at him. The Witcher's hand rose fast as lightning, above his right shoulder, while his left jerked the belt across his chest, making the sword hilt jump into his palm. The blade, leaping from the scabbard with a hiss, traced a short, luminous semicircle and froze, the point aiming at the charging beast. At the sight of the sword, the monster stopped short, spraying gravel in all directions. The Witcher didn't even flinch. The creature was humanoid, and dressed in clothes which, though tattered, were of good quality and not lacking in stylish and useless ornamentation. His human form, however, reached no higher than the soiled collar of his tunic, for above it loomed a gigantic, hairy, bear-like head with enormous ears, a pair of wild eyes and terrifying jaws full of crooked fangs, in which a red tongue flickered like flame. "Flee, mortal man!" the monster roared, flapping his paws but not moving from the spot. "I'll devour you! Tear you to pieces!" The Witcher didn't move, didn't lower his sword. "Are you deaf? Away with you!" The creature screamed, then made a sound somewhere between a pig's squeal and a stag's bellowing roar, making the shutters rattle and clatter and shaking rubble and plaster from the sills. Neither witcher nor monster moved. "Clear off while you're still in one piece," roared the creature, less sure of himself. "Because if you don't, then..." "Then what?" interrupted Geralt. The monster suddenly gasped and tilted his monster's head. "Look at him, isn't he brave?" He spoke calmly, baring his fangs and glowering at Geralt with bloodshot eyes. "Lower that iron, if you please. Perhaps you've not realized you're in my courtyard. Or maybe it's customary wherever you come from to threaten people with swords in their own courtyards." "It is customary," Geralt agreed, when faced with people who greet their guests with a roar and the cry that they're going to tear you to pieces. "Pox on it!" The monster got himself worked up. "And he'll insult me on top of it all, this straggler. A guest, is he? Pushes his way into the yard, ruins someone else's flowers, plays the Lord and thinks he'll be brought bread and salt. Bah!" The creature spat, gasped, and shut his jaws. The lower fangs protruded, making him look like a boar. "So," the witcher spoke after a moment, lowering his sword, "are we going to carry on, standing like this?" "And what do you suggest instead? Lying down?" snorted the monster. "Put that iron away, I said." The witcher nimbly slipped the weapon into its scabbard, and without lowering his arm, stroked the hilt which rose above his shoulder. "I prefer you," he said, "to not make any sudden movements. The sword can always be drawn again faster than you can imagine." "I noticed," rasped the monster. "If it wasn't for that, you'd have been out this gate a long time ago with my boot print on your arse. What do you want here? How did you get here?" "I got lost," lied the witcher. "You got lost," repeated the monster, twisting its jaws in a menacing grin. "Well, unloose your way. Out of the gate, turn your left ear to the sun, and keep walking. You'll soon get back to the highway." "Well, what are you waiting for?" "Is there any water?" asked Geralt calmly. "The horse is thirsty, and so am I, if that doesn't inconvenience you." The monster shifted from one foot to the other and scratched his ear. "Listen, you," he said. "Are you really not frightened of me?"
"I think you thirsty."
"I'm thirsty. Should I be?" Oh my god, when the heck is this part over? We might not make it through the rest of this part. Oh my god. It's like 11 more pages. We'll do one more page. Okay, we'll do this page and then we're gonna have to be done because my throat's getting sore. The monster looked around, cleared his throat, and yanked up his baggy trousers. "Pox on it, what's the harm of a guest in the house? It's not every day I meet someone who doesn't run away or faint at the sight of me. Alright then, if you're a weary but honest wanderer, I invite you in. But if you're a brigand or a thief, I warn you, this house does what I tell it to. Within these walls, I rule." He lifted his hairy paw. All the shutters clattered against the wall once more, and deep in the dolphin's stone gullet something rumbled. "I invite you in," he repeated. Geralt didn't move, scrutinizing him. "Do you live alone?" "What's that to do with you?" said the monster angrily, opening his jaws, then croaked loudly. "Oh, I see. No doubt you'd like to know whether I've got 40 servants all beautiful as me. I don't. Well, pox, are you gonna make use of my generous invitation? If not, the gate's over there." Geralt bowed stiffly. "I accept your invitation," he said formally. "I won't slight the right of hospitality." "My house is your house," the monster said in return, just as formally, though a little offhandedly. "This way, please, dear guest, and leave the horse here by the well." The interior was in need of extensive repair, although it was reasonably clean and tidy. The furniture had been made by skilled craftsmen, if a very long time ago. A pungent smell of dust hung in the dark rooms. "Light!" growled the monster, and the torch in its iron bracket burst into flames and sooty smoke. "Not bad," remarked the witcher. The monster cackled. "That's it? I see you won't be amazed by any old trick. I told you this house obeys my commands. This way, please. Careful, the stairs are steep. Light!" On the stairs, the monster turned. "What's that around your neck, dear guest?" What's that around your neck, guys? Guess we'll find out next time on A Storytime with Falcon. Thank you guys all for joining me for some story time. I definitely wanted to get out a little bit more of the story before just calling it for the night. But unfortunately, I am not going to be able to, you know, talk or stream more, read or stream more, because, like, man, reading's hard. My throat hurts. I'm sorry, more ASMR coughing. Yeah. I hope you guys had a good night. I hope you had a good time over at Talk with Hero and got to learn a lot about me. If you missed that, you feel free to check out the VOD over on his channel. I'm sure he'll have it as a highlight, so it'll, like, go around and, like, it'll, like, be up shortly or something. I don't know. I'm not in charge. Anyway, yeah, that's it for tonight. We'll read some more next stream, maybe? I don't know. We'll see. Tomorrow, playing some Demonologist with Spunky. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. For now, we're gonna see who's around. Oh my god, you won the district display? Congratulations, Drop Bear! I knew you would. I'm so proud of you. Let's see who's a streaming. Who's doing a streaming? Let's go check it out. Let's see. I think we are going to raid Lilinera. She's still doing her dono-thon. We're gonna go over there. I hope you guys have a good time. I'll talk to you later. Make sure you give Lily lots of love. And have a good night, guys. I love you. I love you. Goodbye. I love you. Bye.
Oh, yeah.
God, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We're just ending. We're going over to Lilinera. We're gonna go give her some love. I'm so sorry, Elkovic. Thank you for the raid. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, guys. I'm sorry. I love you.